Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the GynoBits podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Susie Weber, board-certified gynecologist and menopause specialist. On the GynoBits podcast, we'll cover women's health issues with a focus on menopause, vulvovaginal conditions, and sexual health. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the GynoBits podcast today. Today, I'm talking about a very common perimenopausal and menopausal issue, and that is weight gain. It can be very frustrating, can be very common, definitely in the top 3 concerns I hear from my patients. And today I have the privilege of being with Dr. Heather Awad, who is a family medicine physician in Minnesota. She's also a certified life and weight loss coach. She helps professional women over 50 lose weight for the last time. You can also find her hosting her Vibrant MD podcast, where she discusses weight loss, women's health, and food. Thank you for joining me today, Dr. Awad. This is such an important topic.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love talking about this.
Can you tell me how you got into this weight loss coaching and kind of your backstory?
Yeah, so I was, as a primary care doctor, I was always really interested in food as medicine and healthy lifestyles. And then when I wasn't doing that anymore, but just myself in my late 40s, I've been doing just okay with my weight. And then all of a sudden I saw the number on the scale start to climb, like a lot of people do. And then I tried all the things that had worked, like after babies and, at other times, and then it just didn't work at all. So then I got really worried, like, shoot, am I stuck with this? And I dove into the research and looked around at different ways that people can lose weight and thought, oh gosh, looking at this natural insulin resistance we have at this time in our life really seemed to be the magic for weight loss. So I started eating in a way that worked with my own insulin cycles, my own digestive cycles more naturally. And it started to work. And then I also did some life coaching and what I found there was I wasn't very good at keeping commitments to myself because, like a lot of women, we put other people first, we're caretakers. And I was able to kind of shift my mindset to keeping some commitments to myself. And then all of a sudden it got really easy and I lost 27 pounds. So, and that's a couple of years ago.
Wow, that's great. How did you figure out your normal insulin pattern, or how did you figure out what worked best for you? Because I think that's the tough part. It seems like everything, if you follow a certain diet, it seems to work, but then sometimes people just plateau, or maybe they just can't find that right eating pattern that fits with their lifestyle.
Right. I had read Jason Fung's book, The Obesity Code. That one's pretty thick with science, but if people don't mind reading a book that's thick with science, that's a really good one. And he talks a lot about culture and how we eat and how we've come to be in an eat all day culture, or have just a little bit of this, or I deserve. When you say you deserve, or I deserve, the answer is always food. And just looking at those cultural things, I realized that when I was a little kid, we'd sit in front of the TV and we didn't have snacks. We just watched the show, and now, literally everything you go to has food. So looking at how that doesn't work well with that keeps our blood sugar going, our digestive system has to kind of work away at this food all the time. And with that means our insulin is up all the time, and insulin tells our body to store food or to store fat from our food. So we never get that natural time when our digestive system is quiet, and then our body just pulls from the fat stores for energy. And so looking at that idea, and then the more that I researched for women at perimenopause and menopause, noting that there's a natural increase in insulin resistance, which means your body has to make more insulin to process your food. I just put those things together and I thought, if you give yourself some time in between meals to not eat anything, it would probably work for anyone. But when you're perimenopause and menopause, I thought this is actually the magic thing to use as a strategy. And it's really worked well for my clients as well as myself. I could talk a little bit about what people do that doesn't work for them.
Yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you've seen work for your clients.
Yeah. So things that don't work, that just to go on the opposite to start, is a lot of times when we were younger or after we had a baby, things that did work then was calorie restriction and grazing throughout the day, because at the end of the day, then you had eaten less, right? Now, these don't work well anymore in perimenopause and menopause, because when you're 50, if you graze, then you have that digestive system running all the time. And because then your body has to pump up insulin all the time. And so you never have that natural removal of fat for energy. So grazing, even if you're eating less than usual, doesn't work because you have insulin around all the time. And then calorie restriction doesn't work. I have people who say, well, I did my Weight Watchers points before and it worked great after I had my second child, and it's not working at all now. And I think I'm not going to be able to be really specific about this part, but we end up with issues with cortisol as well in perimenopause and menopause. And maybe you can speak to this more than I can. But when we restrict, if we're already having trouble with too much of this stress hormone, when we restrict food, then our body starts to worry that we don't have enough, and it holds on to more. It's like, oh no, something is wrong. We don't have it. Why aren't we getting enough food? Because you're restricting. And then again, the body doesn't naturally let go because it feels like there's more of an emergency state because this cortisol is already high.
That's a good point. And that goes down to the grazing, because I think there's this conventional wisdom a lot of times that just tells us that you should be eating your 3 square meals and you should be eating small, frequent meals. And that really goes against what seems to work for the perimenopausal women. Like you said, if you're grazing all the time, you never really get that time in between where you're not making insulin. And definitely, I think cortisol also just in midlife, where we just have so much going on. We have disrupted sleep, especially with vasomotor symptoms of menopause. And we have a lot of life stress from taking care of everybody and not taking care of ourselves. So that definitely, I think, plays into it. Do you have any thoughts on the intermittent fasting? Have you seen that work for people, or do you really try to just let them try to find their normal body rhythms with eating a few meals throughout the day?
I do like people to kind of pay attention to how they feel, because otherwise, like you said, if it stresses you out, then why would you want to do it for always? And I work with people on really permanent weight loss. So we're trying to find something that they like. So I usually have people start out with eating 3 meals with nothing in between. So you can have water, tea, coffee, you can have a fizzy water if it doesn't have juice in it in between, but to have some time. And people ask me, well, how much? We don't have good science on how much time in between. So I say, 3 to 6 hours, depending on how your schedule is. Because, I work with professional women, so they might have a lunchtime where they have to eat, or, dinner has to be a certain hour. They've got kids or activities. So we look at how you can eat and plan out the time when it works with your lifestyle. But I do also have women who will say, I wake up in the morning, everyone says you have to eat breakfast, and I am not hungry. So I tell them, well, why don't you pay attention to when you do get hungry? Because some of us have to get up terribly early for work. I mean, you're a gynecologist. You have to sometimes get up terribly
Some days,
yeah. And maybe you're not ready to eat then, but maybe 2 hours later you are. So kind of paying attention to when is that morning hunger, and then have your first meal then. Because an eating window or intermittent fasting can also be 11 hours of eating and doesn't have to be 8. And we have some studies on the fasting times, but I'm not impressed that one is better than the other. So because I'm looking at women 50 and over, so they're thinking, and I'm helping them look at how do you want to eat for the next 10 years? So we want to do it in a way that is a way that they like.
Right.
So that's
got to be sustainable.
Yeah. Make it sustainable.
Yeah. Otherwise you'll be really good for 3 days and then you won't be able to keep it going. So do you think there's a better food ratio with regard to carbs and proteins and things like that for women as we age? I've read a lot about how increasing our protein definitely helps with just our muscle function and our bones and things like that, and just overall health. Do you advocate for a different eating style for your menopausal, perimenopausal women?
I have read that same stuff about protein. So I think that we do need to have protein with every meal. And then even if you're looking at, sometimes people will be like, well, my lunch and my dinner are really spread apart. And so we think about a little meal in between. I don't actually like the word snack, but we think about putting a little meal in there as well. And usually that needs protein also. And then also at our age, we need probably more fiber than we're getting. So I always tell people, you want some protein with that meal, you want some fiber with your meal. And that can be vegetables, can be beans, even an avocado that doesn't taste like it has protein or fiber in it, has a lot of fiber in it. So, any of these foods are good fiber for a meal. And then I do advocate for some healthy fats with our meals, because that also helps you last. The protein and the healthy fat help you last between the meals. They give you that feeling of satisfaction that doesn't go away for a number of hours. So people who have already gone through perimenopause and menopause have grown up a little bit with at least with that no fat 80s culture. And even though we've debunked it, it's hard to get away from. And people are worried about it because they say, well, that tablespoon of olive oil has X number of calories. I'm not a calorie counter. So, but actually adding a little more olive oil to your salad or to cook with your eggs or whatever is going to really help you stay full and is not going to increase your insulin levels or your blood sugar. So it's for a weight loss journey, it's perfect. And then again, like avocado is a healthy fat. A little bit of nuts or seeds are also a wonderful healthy fat.
Yeah, I was part of that snack well culture, low fat culture. But I think the thing is they take the fat out and replace it with other things and sugars and things like that to make it to make it palatable. And it never worked. I always try to stay away from that stuff. What do you think about along those lines, diet sodas and diet fake sweeteners and things like sucralose, stevia? Do you have any input on those?
A couple thoughts on those. I will give you some specifics, but a lot of those sweeteners, even though they don't raise your blood sugar, actually raise your insulin level. So again, then you're going to stop, then your body's going to be in fat storage mode. So they don't work that way. We also know that diet sodas are linked with weight gain. So again, for whatever reason, whether it's the insulin or something else, that works against us. Also, I try to help people get off of refined sugar. And I think that the problem with some of the sweeteners is that you still have that eat sweet, want more sweet. And I don't know if that works into the idea of diet sodas causing weight gain or if it's all the insulin. I don't think we have that answer, so I don't really recommend them. If you look at integrative doctors and gut doctors, they hate these diet products because these sweeteners are not nice on our gut bacteria. So for our health and well-being, they're not great. All that being said, stevia by itself does not raise your insulin, does not raise your blood sugar. So if you need something a little bit here or there, that's the one that I would say is okay. I was, looking at fiber products because some people need more fiber and they'll drink a fiber drink. There are psyllium fiber products that have just stevia, which are okay. That's just something for label reading, I think, is to look at. That if you have to have something in there, I would say make it stevia.
That's interesting because there's so many different sweeteners. And now I can't recall the exact study that came out not that long ago. Was it some of the sweeteners were linked with cognitive issues? I can't remember. I'd have to look that up, but there was something about that recently. Gosh, wish I could remember that. But
yeah, I'd have to look that one up too.
I just felt like that was another nail in the coffin of aspartame and the other things. And I think if you get away from them for a while and then you taste them, they taste terrible. At least that's what I've found in my life. So
yeah, it's kind of like just if you take a break from it and think, in general, I think willpower only lasts for like 6 months. So it's not really great for a weight loss journey, but for taking a break from a substance, use a little willpower and be like, okay, I'm going to, give up my diet soda for 1 week or 2 weeks and then see what you think about it. Like, am I okay without it now? Have I found something else? Do I want a cup of tea for the caffeine instead? Am I okay not having that? Have I begun to like this fizzy water? Just do an experiment and try it without it, because like you said, there's just a long list of reasons to not drink them.
What do you think about anti-inflammatory foods? Or, I mean, I know you probably coach women to eat whole foods that don't have a lot of ingredients. I mean, I think that's the healthiest way if you're not eating a lot of processed food, of course. But have you seen some women in your practice cut out processed foods and really have changes with that? Maybe not just in weight, but in just function?
Yes, yes. And the one of the things I'd recommend to your audience is if you have some food in your refrigerator and you don't know what to do with it, look up, like if you have a squash you wanted to try and you've got chicken in your fridge, look up chicken and whatever squash, Google this and look up anti-inflammatory recipe or Mediterranean recipe, because we know these eating styles are really good, and that's a way to experiment with having healthier meals like that. But I definitely have seen that. I had a client who had prediabetes, and she was wearing a continuous glucose monitor, and we went through what she was eating, and she was trying to eat more protein. But she had salami, which is a processed meat, and she had it every day and sometimes twice a day. Like just add a little salami for a little extra protein with lunch, or if she needed something in between meals. And I told her that, long-term health-wise, that wasn't going to work for her. So she said, you know what, actually, I could stop that. I just never thought that it wasn't good for me. So she actually stopped it for a couple of weeks, and her blood sugars came down quite a bit. So it really made a health difference for her. And she switched. She's like, oh, I just switched to chicken and sometimes having beef. And she was perfectly happy with that. She just didn't know that something like a lunch meat was actually working against her health. Wow. By causing more inflammation.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty interesting, because I think about that with bacon and salami. And lunch meats are so easy to get a hold of and so convenient. But that's interesting. She saw that change in her blood sugar, but she did okay with just other meats in general. Didn't see the same thing.
No. Yeah.
Was she doing the glucose monitor type of thing, or?
She was, and that was fun to watch. I actually wore one summer for 2 weeks just to try it, and it was really fun to see what happens there. I think it can be I want to call it a fun tool if you don't have a health problem, because it costs about $225 to to do this for a month. So it's not a cheap thing, but there are companies that you can get this for. But to watch your blood sugar curve and to watch it get really quiet in between meals is very gratifying. And see what foods, when I would have more like a pasta meal that has a lot of flour, would make that whole system last longer, like the blood sugar was up longer. So I had less quiet time in my digestive system, where my body could just pull fat for energy. I could watch what spiked it. Like I did a couple things. Like I went to a coffee shop and got a full sugar vanilla latte and watched that big spike that went out of the healthy range. And then I ate a sandwich with bread, and the spike was exactly the same as the sugar latte, which was surprising to me. I did not expect it to be like that.
That's crazy. I've read about those, and I looked into that too, and I thought maybe I would do that glucose monitoring just for interest, to see how my body handled certain things I was eating. I just haven't gotten around to that yet, but
it's definitely fun. And then looking at food order, which there's a lot of cool stuff online about food order, and some good research on it for blood sugar. There are studies that say if you start with protein first, you don't get as much of a raise in your glucose for the meal. There's some studies that say if you start with the vegetables first, you do better. But either of those, I think, is great. It lets you know that if you look at what's on your plate, if it's all mixed together, eat it mixed together, right? If you have stir fry, eat it. But if you have, a piece of chicken and some potatoes and some vegetables, then know that you're going to want the chicken or the vegetables first, and maybe a little bit of potato at the end. And that will actually help you lose weight.
Yeah, that's great. And definitely, like you said, in perimenopause, there's that increase in insulin resistance. And we've definitely seen that in our menopausal studies and our studies on women using hormone therapy for menopause. We've seen decreased rates of diabetes and insulin resistance as well. So if you can fill up on your protein in your veggies and your fiber and limit the carbs and other things like that that are going to spike your insulin. It makes sense. What do you think about exercise? Because I get a lot of women who are just really pounding it out in the gym and they're really trying to exercise away these extra pounds and not really getting anywhere with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that saying that you can't outrun a bad eating plan is really true. I think when we get to perimenopause and menopause, there's more and more research too that's saying that weight training helps boost our metabolism a little bit. Although I would also just let people know that your metabolism is not broken at perimenopause.
What? Are you sure? No. It feels like it.
It feels like it. It does, because we have it's almost like you get a new body again. Like you got a new body at puberty, you kind of get a new body again at menopause. So it feels like it, but it really, it's not. So, but the cardio is not proven at all. They keep trying to study it. It's not proven at all for weight loss. So, and also you don't want to do exercise that stresses you out again, because the cortisol thing. So I would say do something joyful. If you want to do cardio, like if you love running with your friend, or if you want to take a dance class or pick up a sport you did as a kid, then I would say those things are great. But I think that doing some resistance training starts to get important, because you can probably attest to this too, that we get muscle mass loss after menopause too, right? We want to keep our functional strength up.
Definitely. Yeah. Pushing and pulling and lifting and squatting and all the things that become more difficult as we get older and just put us at risk, I think, for frailty and falls. So I agree. When women come and see you, I'm just curious I'm sure there's a huge range, but is there sort of an average weight gain that women have seen, say, in those few years? Because I see a lot of women in my practice who are struggling with 20 pounds, 30 pounds of weight gain in a short period. And it really seems to be that late perimenopause, that a couple of years before menopause, and even that first year after their last menstrual cycle. It seems like can be a time of rapid weight gain for a lot of women. And I don't know if you've seen that as well.
I have, and that is exactly the amount I'm seeing too, 20 to 30 pounds. People hate it. I mean, I hated it too.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden you're uncomfortable traveling in a airplane seat in the car when you have to sit for a long time. Your clothes don't fit. It's very uncomfortable in your body to have a fairly sudden 20 to 30 pound weight gain. Yeah, that's pretty common with my clients too.
I was just curious to see what you saw. And I know every client's going to be different, but what's your typical strategy when someone says, Dr. Awad, I need help, and they sign up? How do you counsel them, or what kind of plan do you make for them? I'm just curious.
Sure. First, we withdraw from sugar and flour. And those things are, because they're inflammatory, people do actually have withdrawal symptoms of that, and people notice that. Then we have them back again, but intentionally, right? We have the restaurant that has the really good bread. That's the only restaurant we're going to eat the bread in, or you have a certain dessert that you like, or it's your birthday, or, so you really intentionally choose when you're going to have those things, because they are items to be careful about in perimenopause and menopause for our weight and for our health. Even if you're not trying to lose weight, those are substances to be careful with. And then from there, we, like I said, we work on having time in between our meals and feeling and eating enough to be satisfied, not overeating. So we work on not overeating, being able to say no to foods that we don't want, and kind of planning out how we want to eat each day. So I meet with people every week, or I have a couple of other doctors that people meet with as well. And we coach on kind of all the social things, but also looking at things like I told you, like I had that client who was eating protein, but it turned out it was salami. So the nutrition coaching as well. And a lot of times, people do really well, I think, because of the accountability of meeting with a doctor coach every week, but also being able to strategize what's coming up in the next week. I had a client who said, well, Saturday, it was June, she had a baby shower to go to in the morning, 2 grad parties in the afternoon, and a dinner party. And she said, that's 4 events where there's supposed to be food. What am I going to do? And usually I tell people, pick 3 eating events for the day, and she said, but I'm going to go to 1 grad party and I won't eat. And I said, okay, which one are you going to eat at? Which one are you not? Well, I don't know what they're going to have. I said, I think you should still decide ahead of time which one. And at the other one, have water, coffee, or tea.
Yeah, that's good
You know,
advice.
and getting the coaching to feel really comfortable going somewhere and not eating where everyone's eating.
Right. People pour the pressure on you. How come you're not drinking? How come you're not eating? Have some of this, have some of that, because that's
Yeah.
such the social feel good glue that we have. But I agree. I think, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail a lot of times because you don't plan it out. And I don't know if you have them. You said you don't do a ton of calorie tracking yourself, but I've looked at some of the apps, Fitbit. I track things recently on Fitbit, and
Mhm.
every little bite here, every little bite there, it really does add up. And I think it can be eye-opening. So even though you don't feel like you're eating much, it's adding up, definitely.
And we don't track in my program because I want
Yeah.
people to have that freedom. But I
Mm-hmm.
do tell them things like, people are usually surprised to find out that in the middle of the afternoon, when you walk through your kitchen and you see that bowl of cherry tomatoes, you should not eat any of them. Because again, it starts your digestive system going again. Your body has to process that. The insulin comes up and you've wrecked your quiet time. And I don't want to say wrecked because we
Right.
all do it sometimes, but to walk through and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to have
Right.
those cherry tomatoes with my dinner.
Just because you see it, you don't need to eat it, or if
Right.
you're making, I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you're making dinner and preparing it and food. I feel like if the food touches my hand, it just automatically goes into my mouth. So there's this retraining of, you don't have to eat everything that you touch or that you see. You can
Right.
try to wait. And so there's a lot of strategies there, but oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What do you think about weight loss medications? I know that's been such a hot topic with all the GLP-1 medications and things like that. And I don't
Yeah.
know, how do you feel about the oral medications, the injectables?
Yeah. Without getting overly specific about it, I have some
Right.
thoughts.
Yeah.
So one is, we're in a mid-July 2023, we're actually in a shortage again, and our obesity medicine colleagues can't get these medicines for people. So they're not always available. So that's a downside. Another downside is they really work, but the strategy is to take it for always. And I always tell people, no matter what you lose your weight with, you are signing up for always, or at least 10 years. So be careful what you choose. So if you're happy to choose that, then great, choose that and know that you're going to want to do that going forward. They're expensive. I read a study recently that people tend to quit them after a year just because of co-insurance costs or if they have to pay out of pocket costs. So that's an issue. On the other side, they're miraculous for some people. They may not get you to your goal weight, but they may get you that 10% that will help with your blood pressure or your diabetes if you need it. If you've been overweight for your whole life and you don't want to do a lifestyle change, they can be a great method. So I'm definitely not against them, but I just think, again, you have to, whatever you choose to lose the weight is going to be what you're going to need to do to maintain your weight loss. And that's why in my program, I try to make it so easy and so simple and using stuff that people like and tailoring it to their schedule and how they travel and what they do with their family, because, that's how you make it permanent. Because we don't want those medicines also to be a yo-yo diet, like take it for a year and then gain the weight back. I think the hard thing is that people have said, well, let's do the medication and then we'll also teach people the lifestyle stuff. But most people who take the medication, it really cuts not just their cravings, but their hunger so low that they can't really learn the lifestyle stuff. They're like, well, I just eat a little bit and then I'm full. And so there isn't need to learn hunger cues and some of the lifestyle coaching we do when we don't use medications just become a moot point at that point. On the other side, again, I have people who have had that feeling like, I feel like I'm addicted to food and I eat a lot of it all the time. And those people, again, the weight loss medications have kind of been miraculous for them because it really quiets all of that because they can only eat a little bit and then they feel full.
I think that's great advice. You're looking at it for the long term, and it's another tool in the toolbox, and it's certainly helpful to have that. But like you said, if you don't know the tips and tricks and the lifestyle stuff, it may be hard to just sustain that forever and ever. And I guess that's what I worry about. I don't prescribe the medications as a gynecologist. I know a lot of docs do, but I worry about that. If the medication's unavailable or it's not sustainable due to cost. What happens when that person stops the medication and rebounds and yo-yos, and because we know how bad that can be over time. But
Right.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
I definitely get people in my program who want to try lifestyle first, and then also people who've had side effects that they didn't like with the medications. So
yeah, you can always start lifestyle and move it up to the next tier. But
Mhm.
yeah, but they have been pretty miraculous. I've seen some women using them that have had really huge losses in weight and just increase in their function, and obviously, blood pressure and blood sugar and all of that stuff following suit, which is so important. So
Yeah.
this has been a great session. I'm so happy that you were able to come and talk with us today. Can you tell the listeners where to find you and if they want to work with you or your different platforms?
Sure. Easiest place to find me is at my website, heatherawadmd.com. You can find me on all the socials, really with the same handle, or find my podcast, which you can look up my name or Vibrant MD podcast.
Great. Yes. And I will put a plug in for your podcast, definitely, because I've listened to some of your episodes, the one on nuts and the continuous glucose monitoring. And I like them because they're very informative. And, as a busy mom, whatnot, they're at a perfect length for me. Get in, get the information and get out. So I love it. So anyway, thanks again, Dr. Awad. I really appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me for today's GynoBits podcast. If you like this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share. Just a reminder that this is not medical advice and you should consult with your personal physician. Also, the opinions and views are mine only and do not reflect those of my employer. If you would like more information or to consult with me, please go to my webpage, healthiermenopause.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Healthier Menopause and Facebook, Menopause MD.